Okay, now let's go on to video number 2. Here we have the Fujifilm XT2. I know you're familiar with the shutter release mech, switch for turning the camera off and on, and the actual shutter release. Well, the actual button that you press is not the actual shutter release. Why, sure it is. No, it's not. This is a silo shutter release. It is specifically designed so you could actually use one of these little doohickeys that screws into, this is called a soft release, screws into the actual silo, gives you a soft shutter release, or let you use one of the old cable releases and screw in there, because the actual shutter release is right there in the center at the bottom. Let's take a look at the cross section of the, let's first look at the top. Here's the actual on-off switch. Here's the actual silo. This is the threaded point, and at the bottom of that well, this conical well here, is the actual shutter release. This is the actual shutter release, which you never press. This thing which you press right here, cross section, this is below the camera. This is the surface of the camera right here. The top plate, on-off switch right here. The conical threaded part right here where your trigger goes. Okay? There are two issues here. It's not an issue of design for Fujifilm to give you the capability of A, using a soft release, or B, using a cable release. This is a silo that actually fits over the actual shutter release. There's two issues with that, and they're issues on your part. Number one, you never over tighten this. I've actually seen people hold this back, take a pair of pliers to the top of the soft release, because I lose my soft releases. Yeah, well, that's great for you. And they'll actually hold it in the off position, because you actually keep turning it, it'll actually switch over to the on position, and they'll screw it in there. What happens when you do that, which you shouldn't do, is it'll cause deformation in this silo that actually fits inside this cavity, which rests on top of the actual shutter release for the XT2. Shouldn't be doing that. Screw it on, finger tight. If it falls off, that's your problem. There's a couple of ways to actually take care of it. You could actually stick a quarter drop. Most people are like, what's a quarter drop? That's like barely enough to even see it, of blue Loctite, not red Loctite, but blue, at the topmost portion of the threads. Most people would get it wrong. That's why I don't recommend you doing it, because most people would screw that up. The second thing is, if you actually get a bunch of dirt and grime in here, it'll actually wedge between the shutter release, wedge between the silo for the shutter release and the actual channel that it actually sits in. This actually obviously operates up and down. This is what you think is the shutter release. It's not the shutter release. It's the silo that sits over top of the shutter release. Okay? I hope I explained that kind of simply without... There's another way to actually say that to make it more simple. I think I've made it as simple as possible. Number one, no dirt. Okay? Try not to get any dirt in here. It doesn't mean it's the delicate camera. It just means that there's actually a gap between the actual on-off switch of the shutter release, a mech, this is all one mech, and the actual silo, which sits on top of the shutter release. The thing you press is not the shutter release. Understand what it is. It is a sleeve that sits over the top of the shutter release. Why did Fujifilm do that? To give you these two options, a soft release option, but specifically they didn't design it for that. They gave it the option so it would be a true retro cam, and the fact that you could screw in one of those old bleeping cable releases, which I've got like a dozen of those things, into the top here, and actually use the old-fashioned film cable release. But if you over tighten, it'll cause deformation of the silo, and that will cause the thing that you think's a shutter release, which is not, to actually deform in the actual channel that it slides up and down in. I hope I made that perfectly clear. I think I made it really, really simple for you to understand, okay? Thank you for watching. If you like these videos, click the link below. Tell me to jump off a cliff. Whatever makes you happy. You can always make a small donation. Anything to help, let me know how I can help. Bye.